The Song of Saya is a disturbing entry in the horror visual novel genre, taking the form of a text-heavy, minimally interactive experience. The story follows Fuminori, who, after undergoing brain surgery, is burdened with an altered perception of reality where all people appear as grotesque monsters. That's the plot, and the world itself is, an abhorrent fleshy nightmare. The game is, Lovecraftian in tone, invoking a horror that confronts players with the existential dread of an unrecognizable world. Beyond its surface level horror, we can tackle this visual novel from many different perspectives, some of which I will share them with you now, and I will specifically talk about the censored version of the game, since I fully believe that there is no real reason to even mention the uncensored one. And the uncensored one doesn't even, it shouldn't even exist in the first place. So yeah, Lovecraft's influence in the Song of Saya is immediately evident through its narrative structure and visual choices. Like many works influenced by Lovecraft, the game minimizes player agency. Players primarily read, with few choices that alter the story's course. This passive engagement is critical as it immerses players in a nightmarish journey that is out of their control, a core tenet of Lovecraftian horror, which focuses on humanity's insignificance in the face of incomprehensible forces. In Freud's concept of the uncanny, horror arises from a disturbance in the familiar, where elements that should be ordinary become disturbing in their wrongness. For Fuminori, familiar people are rendered monstrous and everyday settings are twisted into scenes of horror. This violation of normalcy highlights Freud's idea that horror is not foreign but a distortion of what should feel safe. The sight of friends appearing as monsters is a return of the repressed fear that one's perception of reality may not be as stable or accurate as it seems. This is a key element of the uncanny that grounds Fuminori's personal horror in a profound existential doubt. In the Song of Saya, the horror of the uncanny is inextricably linked to themes of domesticity and gender norms, with Saya's monstrosity rooted in her incongruous blend of otherworldly terror and traditional femininity. This paradox is highlighted through Goodwin's interpretation of the uncanny as tied to gender norms and the notion of homeliness. Saya's existence reflects an unsettling clash between alien monstrosity and her role as a domestic figure, as a caring and pleasurable girlfriend to Fuminori, albeit in distorted ways. The game presents her not only as a source of affection for the protagonist, but as an uncanny embodiment of patriarchal ideas around domesticity, love, and even gendered caregiving. Through this lens, Saya's identity is crafted through a distinctly patriarchal process of socialization. Her otherness becomes a reflection of the familia, where both self and other are socially constructed. This interaction between self and radical alterity echoes Haraway's idea of emerging pleasures, experiences, and powers that can change the rules of the game. Haraway challenges rigid boundaries of pure knowledge, arguing instead of knowledge mediated through human subjectivity. Saya's development and behavior are shaped by her relationship with Dr. Ogai, who simultaneously objectifies and nurtures her, embodying the mediated knowledge Haraway describes. Ogai teaches Saya language and cultural norms, mediating her understanding of humanity through his paternalistic gaze, which is, as Haraway argues, inherently laden with normative values. Ogai's relationship with Saya becomes a complex site for reimagining human and non-human interactions. Though he transforms her, he also endures the encounter without succumbing to the shattering horror that overwhelms Fuminori. This dynamic highlights the potential for alternative narratives, where Saya's otherness is neither domesticated nor entirely alienated. In Haraway's view, knowledge is an interpretive relational process, and Ogai's mediation reflects this situated knowledge, suggesting a pathway to understand Saya as a cosmic entity with her own transformative potential beyond traditional human relationship. The question of how Saya's identity might evolve through different encounters extend beyond the horror genre. If, rather than being constrained by Fuminori's vision, she were engaged in a new form of kinship and dialogue with the Earth and humanity, Saya could represent a cosmic alterity, a being reshaping both her own understanding and the human conception of home. This interpretation reinforces Haraway's critique of science as a neutral arbiter and suggests that our encounters with radical alterity, like Saya's, have the potential to transform the very framework through which we construct both knowledge and connection. The game also lends itself well to a Lacanian reading. There you go, another Lacanian reference in this channel, particularly through Lacan's notion of the real. The real is a layer of experience that exists beyond language and symbol, a chaotic realm that defies understanding and is therefore terrifying. Fuminori's altered state confronts him with this dimension directly, right? His inability to comprehend or relate to the world around him disrupts his previously coherent identity and perception, severing him from society and plunging him into isolation. Saya, who is perceived as normal by Fuminori's distorted senses, embodies a fractured ideal where his fantasies of escape and normalcy are realized but ultimately deepen his entrapment. She's a distorted anchor to his deteriorating self, embodying what Lacan calls l'objet petit a, or the elusive object of desire. She represents Fuminori's fixation of finding stability, even in an impossible form. Yet, by latching onto this ideal, he delves deeper into unreality, drifting farther and farther away from any common human experience, and thus into a fragmented existence. Derrida's concept of différance speaks to the shifting, ambiguous nature of Saya herself. Saya is both familiar as a romantic partner and unfathomable as an other, as a Lovecraftian entity, whose alien nature Fuminori is desperate to ignore. Derrida's idea of différance suggests that meaning is deferred and difference inherent, destabilizing any sense of definitive identity or understanding. Saya is simultaneously lover and monster, known yet unknowable, embodying a horror that stems from the impossibility of fully grasping the other. The perspective shifts in the Song of Saya between Fuminori's distorted perception and his friend's normal perspectives. Further emphasize this concept. As the game toggles between the grotesque and the mundane, it underscores the reality itself is not fixed but a space of ongoing reinterpretation. Fuminori's horror, therefore, is Derridian. It is a reflection of the fundamental instability of perception and the impossibility of reconciling his truth with that of others. For Baudrillard, hyperreality describes a reality that has become a simulacrum, a copy with no original replacing the real. In Fuminori's world, this is literalized as he no longer perceives real people and places, but grotesque, monstrous facsimiles, right? His surgery creates a personal hyperreality, where his sensory experiences bear no relation to the actual world around him, eroding any common ground he might share with others. His friends, who should be familiar, are transformed into horrific creatures, and the setting he once knew are reduced to grotesque landscapes. Baudrillard's concept underscores that Fuminori's world is not simply frightening because it is ugly or unfamiliar, but because it is a false construct that usurps reality entirely. Fuminori's isolation becomes total as he loses access to any shared objective reality, which Baudrillard might argue as being supplanted by a simulacrum, one that bears no resemblance to the world he once inhabited. Finally, the Song of Saya's format as a visual novel played directly into Guy Debord's theory of the spectacle, which posits that society has turned into an image-dominated experience where people passively consume rather than actively engage. The minimal interactivity of the Song of Saya amplifies its sorrow by relegating the player to the role of a helpless observer, mirroring Fuminori's own lack of control. Just as he's trapped within his horrific new reality, players are trapped in the text-heavy, choice-limited experience, forced to spectate without power over the unfolding horror. In essence, the visual novel form transforms the player into a spectator of horror, reinforcing the board's notion of alienation through the spectacle. By limiting player agency, the Song of Saya immerses its audience in a world where terror is both immediate and inescapable, a spectacle that cannot be turned away from. The Song of Saya achieves a unique kind of horror by dismantling the very foundations of reality, perception, and agency. Fuminori's journey reflects a struggle with a world that has become unmoored by any common reality, forcing him and the player into a confrontation with an unrelenting Lovecraftian terror. In experiencing the Song of Saya, players encounter horror not as an external monster but as a disturbance with the very fabric of existence, echoing Lovecraft's conviction that the true horror lies in the limits of human understanding. Through Fuminori's eyes, the Song of Saya reminds us that the most profound horror may not be the otherworldly, but the fragile, crumbling borders of the real. All in all, it is a pretty solid Lovecraftian horror interpretation, but I believe there is one game that does it better. Hell, I think it's the best Lovecraftian horror out there.